Okay, so I've had a few people ask for kind of like general workflows on how to create segmentations in Khartes, or more specifically, how to manipulate segmentations that you've created with vc3d in Khartes, how to expand them, refine them, all the above. So I'm not going to go into like a general vc3d usage just because I've done that quite a bit in other videos, and then I've got some guides on the website already. Some of them are a little bit out of date, but they're close enough. I'll put this information that I'll kind of type out as I go on this notepad here in a comment when I post the video. But the main thing to make sure of is you're on a specific fork of Khartes. I'm going to try to get these merged into Chuck's main repository, um, hopefully pretty soon here, and then make sure that you also read this auto extrapolate document, which looks like, 1 second, I'll get it pulled up. You won't see it if you're not on the right branch. Looks like this. The information here and like how it works has actually changed a little bit, but not significantly. But the rest of the information is correct. In particular, this overlay thing, which I'll also go over. But if you forget how to do it, that document exists. So the first thing we'll do is open vc3d. I'm going to assume at this point that you have vc3d installed and you have the data that you need downloaded on your PC. We'll open up scroll 5. For now, I'm just going to open up the volume that contains the data there. For all of these, you can get the surface predictions and the raw volume data. From the raw volume data can come from this full scroll 5 volumes, volume SAR right here. And then the predictions should come from, I may have uploaded them. There's fibers. Right here, this 090.r. So I'll put a couple comments in here. Predictions. So just make sure you have those two. You don't need them downloaded. You can stream them for Khartes, but if you want to view them in vc3d, you'll need them downloaded. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the path of assuming that you have some vc3d segmentations already created. You can start from anything that we have on the AutoGens thing here if you'd like. Within scroll 5 on my community uploads, I have a number of them. Or you can create your own from the patches that also exist here. But I'm not going to go into, again, detail too much on how to create those because I've made quite a few tutorials and videos on that, and this will get too long. So we'll assume that you have one started. Here's a couple traces that I made in scroll 5. And let's say that my purpose here is to refine areas in one of these traces that have issues, or to inject some kind of correct information for later tracing runs. So I would just first identify an area where it's gone wrong. I'm not going to pick a super large area just for this video because, again, it'll get quite long. So let's say we want to go here. All I would do to get an initial OBJ here, so what we're going to do is take the trace and then get a region of interest that we want and create an OBJ from that to start from. So I'll do that by just hitting Actions, Draw B Box, and then I'm just going to draw a bounding box around the region that I want to refine. and then hit selection surface from selection. And that'll make a new TIFF XYZ of specifically the region of interest that I'm looking for. And because it's in TIFF XYZ format right now, we can't yet use that in Khartes. So we need to do right-click it, hit convert to OBJ, and then you're going to want to decimate it. The amount kind of depends on how quick you are with Khartes or how frustrating it is for you to work with meshes that have a lot of nodes. For me, I prefer it to be more decimated and potentially a little bit less accurate because it's quicker to fix. That's for me. Some people might like 1. I would not recommend 0. And then check align grid, clean surface outliers, and you could drop this clean segment down to like probably 2. That'll create an OBJ for you. It'll be in the directory that that was in, so you can hit copy segment path, and then you can paste it into here, and here's my OBJ. To import it into Khartes, now we need to open Khartes. Just a second here. Again, I'll assume that you have Khartes installed. If you need help on getting it installed, there's a fair bit of documentation on the repository, but also happy to help. Let's just make sure that I'm in the right one, which it appears that I am. So I will start. I have to paste a stupid command here to start my Khartes because my Linux has some kind of weird issue with XCB. So I'll open Khartes. And I'm going to create a new project. And I'm just going to call this scroll 5. Now to attach my ZAR volumes, I just need to hit attach ZAR OME store. I'll go to my PRQ172 full package where I have the volumes for scroll 5. I have the predictions. I'll call this surf. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but and then I need to get the raw data, which I have here, and I'll just call this vol data or something. Oh, do it afterwards. So now you'll have both the predictions and the volume. You can see them down here. And note that we're in the volumes tab. For you to work from surface predictions, if you want to use those as any kind of guides for your auto extrapolation, which I would highly recommend, at least where they're good, you need to set the surface as base, the volume as overlay 1, and then to see your predictions, you can drop the opacity of your overlay, which is the volume data, down a little bit, and then change the color map of your predictions. Now, I would make sure you set this as an indicator volume, which turns on nearest neighbor interpolation rather than trilinear interpolation, so it doesn't change the values of the data. If you use any kind of linear interpolation where you have 1 and 0 near each other, you could get like half. You could get, say 0.5 or anything along that, which you don't want. I set this to 254 just because it eliminates all the other random colors from the color map. And then you should be able to see your predictions overlaid. The opacity you can set kind of to however you want. This is going to really depend on how much you want to see of the original data versus the predictions, how much you trust the predictions. It's kind of personal preference. Now, if you want to import that OBJ you made earlier, you just hit File, Import OBJ, navigate to your directory that was placed in. Hold on. I'm just going to copy this to my desktop so it's easier to find. It'll take a second to run, and then you should, hopefully, have an OBJ. If I make it active. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find them. There you go. Just kind of got to pan around a little bit. So here is the OBJ I imported, marked by this kind of cyan line. This overlaps quite a bit with the color that I have for my volume, so I'm going to change that. I'm just going to make it red. Makes it a little bit easier to see. And then for actually refining it, you'll see because I decimated this OBJ, it's now a little bit off. You know, it doesn't stick to the surface quite as well as I would have liked, which is fine because I don't have that much here anyways, and then you can see where the hole was. There's just no vertices there. So what I do for refining one that exists already, let's say that we have the region or the area that we want to refine. We're not expanding it necessarily. We might, but that's not the purpose. We're just trying to make sure that this spot in particular is well segmented. What I do is, because the grids are all aligned, these are all in a row, I can just pick a level. Let's start, say, at the very top, column 1, row 1. And if we zoom in here, you can see our points. I would recommend actually going in 1 so you can see the line, in 1 and down 1, so column 1, row 2, then you can see the line. And you can move along here basically one at a time. This is all I would do from here, is move all the way to the left, stay on this, don't move in your other planes. As you go, you can add nodes, but I recommend when you do this to constrain your movement to just this pane by hitting R or X on your nodes and just move node-wise, basically. You just move over a node at a time. You can adjust again in your other planes as you see fit, but don't pan along these panes or you'll get lost. The hardest part of Khartes is staying, like, keeping a reference to what you know to be true. Because you're moving in full 3D, you can kind of get lost on the surface very quickly, and you'll lose track of what you can use as like guides or references if you want to know what really is the surface. If you start moving around in all your other panes at once, you're going to find nodes that were placed automatically, like all these other nodes, when you imported your OBJ, and you're not going to know which one is right and which one isn't. You won't know which ones you placed, which ones were placed automatically. So it's best to just kind of keep yourself in order here by just going row by row. You can move around later once you get more of this sorted, and I do. Once you have, like, I guess what you could call a very good like ground truth area of where you're trying to go. But we just keep moving along. I'm going to plug all this. I'm going to go all the way through this row here. And I'm just tightening up the sheet by clicking. I'm hitting W or A. W, A, S, and D can move this node around in this plane here, or you can hold Shift to drag it, and then Shift again to turn the node selection back, or the node placement mode back on. But I finished a row, so you can see you can pretty quickly finish a single row of a decent sized segmentation pretty quick. And then all I would do again is just move down a row. So you've started here. You can see which one I did pretty easily because the nodes are so much more dense. So all I've done is now move my cursor onto this next row, the first node or the last node, depending on what you want to call it, and then hit R. And now I'll do the same thing, but in the other direction. So again, I'm just adding nodes where they're necessary. You don't have to add nodes if the surface is true in a spot. You know, you shouldn't add nodes for no reason, really. I'm just kind of clicking along here. Don't forget about your Y plane down here. It helps because it adds diagonal nodes. The Z and the X plane are primarily, well, depending on the angle you're looking at it, right? Z is always the same, but then X or Y, depending on what part of the scroll you're on rotation-wise, can add points that are diagonal versus like strict row column, and those can help quite a bit with very strange behavior in the scroll. where it both rotates this way and also this way at the same time, um, it becomes kind of hard to pin the mesh exactly on the surface in those scenarios unless you also add some like contour points in your other panes. You don't have to do it all the time. Primarily, you're annotating or segmenting in two at once, depending on again the orientation of the scroll that you're in the place that you're at. You're usually using either Z and X or Z and Y. But it's good to add these every once in a while if you see, especially if you see one of these panes come off quite a bit. It can be good to add those points. Another thing is don't add, like if I have a point here, I shouldn't put a point right next to it. You're going to force the mesh to be pinched at that spot, and it won't, not only will it not look good, but it'll be frustrating because you probably won't see the node. You'll wonder why you can't move the sheet as much as you would like to at that spot. So it's just good practice to avoid that entirely. So far I've been placing nodes completely manually, and this is fine. You can go quite fast this way. If your surface predictions are good, you barely even have to look at the surface. You need to be careful with that because obviously if your surface predictions are bad, you'll have issues, but if you trust them, it can be really quick, just basically not even looking at the surface and just placing them along the predictions. It's good to save pretty frequently, and then also as you go, I would say probably I didn't do it in this one because I was a little bit distracted, but typically like as you get, I don't know, maybe every 30 or 40 points you place to just hit a reparam, which reparameterizes the surface with all the changes that you've made. So Khartes does a local parameterization every time you place a node, but that more global parameterization doesn't run unless you hit reparam. And if those two get very far out of sync as you move around on the surface, you'll start to notice that your nodes aren't triangulating maybe the way that you thought they would. You'll get a node that goes like, say, from here, say this node would connect way down here, or way over here, where it probably shouldn't. And the reason for that is typically your more like global parameterization is just out of date with your local one. Something else to avoid in Khartes, which is mentioned quite a bit in any kind of Khartes tutorials, and then I've talked about anytime I've shown Khartes as well, is avoiding skinny triangles. And by a skinny triangle, I mean like if I were to place, say, this point, let's just actually see if I can find one first. Very long, skinny triangles. Yeah, I mean, these are obviously bad, right? You don't want really long triangles. You want to try to maintain some kind of sort of grid-ish pattern. I don't really have a good example here. Maybe we'll run into one as I make it. So we'll just go down one more. And you can see, because I've decimated this mesh, some of these nodes are just a ways out. So I'll just scoot those down. Probably place one in the middle here, scoot this one up. I can place a couple along here. This is where these other panes can help quite a bit because it's very obvious right here what sheet I'm supposed to be following. And now we're going to the right, so I'll keep following this. I move in Khartes almost exclusively with X or R. X or R are the same thing. They're just a different keybind. David suggested adding R as the keybind because it is more naturally where your hand falls. And although I first was a little bit hesitant because I have used X for like 2 years now in Khartes. Microphone turned off. I think I'm back now. Let me just check. Yeah, everything looks good. Oh yeah, where I was. So yeah, I was just saying it's use R. It's a better keybind. So you can see what I just did there actually was I hit R on one of these panes because I got a little bit distracted by my mic shutting off. And then I kind of lost where I was. So that's again the reason why I would really recommend constraining your movement as you're adding nodes. Say, because you can add nodes in any pane that you want. The bigger thing is like when you add nodes, as you're adding them, like in a line, you want to make sure that you restrict your movement for that to for that line to just that pane, or you'll get lost on kind of where you are. This one is a little bit confusing, but I'm almost certain this goes up here. Maybe not. Looks like we're actually aiming for this guy down here. Let's check again. Yeah. All right, so keep chugging along. Let's just make sure. If I place this one, so I'm going to do a little trick here in Khartes where you can place a node here, zoom in on all my panes. Okay, so that seems like we're still in the right one. I'll add another one here, and then I'll hit R again. Now I'm a little bit below where I want to be, so I can scoot it up, and I think that looks right. So let's move back here a little bit. That still tracks with where we want to be. Okay. So that looks good. So I'll just place another one here and here, and we'll keep moving along. I'm going to finish this row, and then I'll show what the extrapolation looks like. Okay, so I've done that one. Again, I'm just going to add a little bit here. I'm going to see this pane again when I go down one row, but adding these in the other areas kind of helps to be sure that as I go down or I go up, I've referenced it from the previous one I'm at, and so it's very easy for me to know, hey, have I made a mistake somewhere along the way? Because from each row, I'm somewhat extrapolating down a little bit from a known region of truth to a region that I'm going to be going to next. So I'm kind of like pulling that, like, I guess, like a probability of it being right down or up rather as I go down the sheet. Let's move down one more. So we'll start from here, and now I'll do a little bit of the extrapolation stuff. What I like to do with these is start from relatively zoomed in. So you got to be first in the place mode placement node, which you can change with shift. Just look at your cursor. To extrapolate to the right, you just hit 4. And the first time you do this, it'll be a little bit slow, but it does cache that saved data. So every time after that should be a little bit faster. And you can see it's dropped me off at the end of that. So when I hit 4, it extrapolated along the currently available window. It only goes to the bounds of the available window and then to whichever direction you want. So when you hit 4, it basically crops out this part of it. And then it adds nodes along the prediction by interpolating a path along those predictions. You can affect some of those things with this auto extrapolation settings thing. So the half width is just, it also crops out kind of a width around the area that it's going. The spacing is how far apart the points should be spaced. It works on a skeletonization of the prediction. So if you want, you can stop it whenever you hit a branch point in a skeleton, which is anywhere that there is more than 3 neighbors for a specific spot. But a branch point is always like a merge, like this would be a branch. So if you wanted to stop at those, you can. If you wanted to try to continue through those, you can allow it to do that by not having that checked, and then you can set a threshold. Basically what it'll do is in the angle from the branch point, it'll try to pick the one that's most in alignment with what your current angle is of where you're going. Is probably the easiest way to explain it. You can modify it with that, and then this center view on last added point, if you want, you can turn that off. But what that does is it just drops you off at the last one. So I ended up here. So let's put myself back in the add node and just hit 4. You can see it was faster on that one. It dropped me off here. I'll place a couple on this, and this works in all panes, but it is, however, much faster in the image or Z pane. So I would recommend mostly using it there. You can use it in the other panes, though. It works. It works in all of them. I'm going to go back to where I was, though. Again, I would really recommend um, not losing track of where you are when you're adding, because it's really easy to just move down here and then I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know what's true and what is my reference truth versus like what I can see on the surface. You can zoom up quite a bit when you do this too, so it can be pretty fast to just hit 4. It'll drop me off. Everything looks good. I'll slap a couple points in this view as well. This one is a little ambiguous, but I can at least put probably a couple here, and I'll leave it there. When you're going through this, you don't have to, like, it's not like at every one of these 3 panes, I have to put a point here. This is one of the biggest benefits of Khartes versus vc3d is I can just skip adding nodes where I don't know. And it's almost certain that I'll find another plane somewhere or another view of it that is less ambiguous. So if you're confused in an area, just go around it. Find another angle to look at it, come around from the bottom or a different pane. It'll become much more clear. I'm going to add these little ones manually here at areas of like really high curvature. Sometimes it helps to do it manually. You don't have to, but it can behave a little bit better if you just add some points yourself. This issue that you're seeing here is because Khartes thinks that we are going around a full wrap, and so it's triangulating this wrong. Part of that is because I haven't reparameterized in a while, so the first thing I'll do is save. I'll reparameterize. I'll zoom in a little bit because it's also based on that triangulation. When it does that, like local reparameterization is based on how far zoomed in or out you are. So if you're zoomed out quite far, it can try to connect to ones that realistically aren't anywhere near where you are. This happens primarily in areas that have very tight curvature, like this one right here, where we're going around in here in a super tight curve. So I'll place a few points and just keep moving along to the right. We'll hope that what I might need to do here, I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to reparameterize. That went well, so I'm going to save this. Again, you're going to want to save like frequently when you're making changes, especially in areas like this where it's this really high curvature and you got to kind of screw around a little bit to get the mesh to do what you want it to do. It's good practice to save, because when it does do what you want, that can be quite helpful. You don't want to have to reset, basically. I'm going to try to get back to where I was. I accidentally hit recenter instead of reparam. There you go. So we're coming along here. This area is very confusing, but that's all right. We'll power through it. And that's the end of our segment anyways, right there. Okay. So let's add, just at the end here, let's add a few. Because this is confusing, where we know we're correct, we want to make sure that we can like have a good reference state, basically. We know it's good here, so let's make sure that we get a couple pins in here, or at least we thought it was good there. So now we'll go up a little bit and just double check. If I come through here, so what I'm doing now is I'm just going through basically my, I know these are good, right? These were my starters. So I know these are good, or at least these are my reference now, right? Regardless of where the actual surface started when I imported this OBJ, this is now my reference truth. So what I'm doing is I'm moving along it horizontally, and then as I move it along it horizontally, I'm checking its vertical where it goes vertically. So I'm making sure, or trying to make sure basically, that as I move along this horizontally, that I have agreement that each of these nodes, if I follow it down here, goes to the same area. This is really the easiest way to check if you have a sheet jump or to fix a sheet jump. I don't think I have one right now, but I'm just going to go through this quick. In this pane, also you can turn tracking cursors on with T, or is it Shift T? I don't remember now. Is it C? C. Yeah, it's C. That'll show in each pane which one yours are in. Also, you can do it right here. But I'm just making sure I don't have a sheet switch quick. I'm hitting R again on each of these horizontal nodes in the same row and just making sure that I have nothing as I go to the left, which is down in this one. They don't have a sheet switch along here. And again, I don't think I do, but there we go. That's not where I am. Now, the only issue that you'll have is your previously visited nodes, when you reparameterize, they might no longer be actually in the exact row that they were in before. So when you first start on a row, they might all be in the line. As you go, though, and you reparameterize, they might move, they might shift and no longer be in that exact line anymore. Not always true, but sometimes. Just something to keep in mind if you get lost. So we've moved all the way through here. We finished this row. So now let's move on to the next row, which is this one. This row you'll see is part of what was our hole. And you can see why it was a hole, because there's a sparse predictions in here, and it's a little bit ambiguous what the actual surface is. We can see it a little bit easier, but the tracer was not able to establish like a consensus, more or less, along the points that it was looking for. And so it just didn't put anything there. So we're going to go ahead and add that information. This is the primary reason that we're in this one right now. So I'll hit save again. I'm going to reparameterize real quick. I need to delete a few nodes. Again, you can see when you're in areas with really high curvature, see I zoomed in and it helped a little bit there, but when you're in areas with really high curvature, it becomes a little bit difficult to place nodes without ending up with some kind of weird mesh artifacts. But the best thing you can do is just kind of make sure that in all your panes, what's usually happening is in one of your views, your surface is moved quite a bit. Like it's like you'll have like one of these like pointing like way over here, way over here. And so it's trying to attach to something that shouldn't be there. I'm trying to figure out where this is right here. You can see my tracking cursor. I think it's this node. There we go. Yeah, that was pulling the whole thing down. So I've gone through this a little bit coarsely. What I'm going to do now is just see if I can kind of identify a little bit better how that sheet follows by just kind of stepping along this. This doesn't have to be perfect, but this is how you can kind of navigate through a slightly difficult region. We are at, yeah, I mean that's a pretty strange behavior there. I think we're near the yeah, we are. There's a hole that was punched in the side of this somewhere. I think basically right here below us, and I think we're pretty much right where that is. But we'll keep moving. I think we're right. I think we got it through there, so we'll keep chugging along. To the left now, it's behaving kind of in the way that I would have expected it to. If I look in my other panes, it looks like it's following the same surface. If I take this one and move it, kind of have an agreement here as to what surface we're on, which is good to see. When I place these nodes, I don't get any kind of weird mesh behavior. That would indicate that I've gone, very far away from where I should be. You'd see like a sharp seam in the mesh somewhere. And when I place that one, you can see it snapped onto this line here, which again, it's a good sign because that means that this node uh, where I place this agrees with where my other ones were on. So I think I'm along the right path. So we'll just keep going. It can get quite confusing in these though. Again, that's why it's very good to keep a reference to stay on a plane, so you don't lose track of what you're actually on anymore. So these were some nodes that I had placed earlier, and they are wrong. An easy way to tell is to kind of like drag this around, or to just highlight like this cursor's up here, or if I drag this, you can see if I go to this surface, I'm going up, but I actually want to go down to this one. So when I placed these earlier, I placed them on the wrong one. So I started to go up when I needed to stick on this bottom one down here, which means we go down here, down here, down here. And something to keep in mind when you're doing this is you want to make sure that you're placing your nodes on the recto surface, which is the inside surface of the sheet. So I want my nodes here to be on the top of the sheet in this plane, and then in this plane, you can figure this out just by zooming out and seeing where's the center of the scroll. In this plane, I want them also on the top. But that isn't always true, so you need to keep track of, well, what's not always true is it's not always the top. Sometimes you want to place them on the bottom, so you just need to keep track of where you are. The recto surface is the one that has the writing on it, so we want to make sure that we're actually placing our segmentation line there. When we make a surface volume, you do get a little bit of padding in the sense that like we create TIFs, 64 TIFs or 32 TIFs or whatever. And so you've got a little bit of padding there, but if you're significantly off on what the actual recto surface is, you're going to have some problems with your ink detection models, most likely. This is kind of a confusing spot here. This is a colesis, which means there's two sheets overlap. This is where the different kalima, which are the different sheets that a scroll is made out of, joined together. It's confusing because there is actually two sheets here, but this other sheet in the middle isn't, there's no writing behind that because it's behind another surface. So it's a little distracting and confusing. So I'll do another reparam. So now I finished that row. That one took a little bit longer because we had to go through that difficult region with the hole. But we navigated through that. You can see my mesh is getting a little weird here. I'm fine with that for now. We'll fix that later. What's happening is as I reparameterize and the surface becomes more flat in certain areas, we end up with larger gaps between them in certain spots. And also because there was this hole here, there wasn't a very dense set of points to begin with. But we're going to just keep moving down. We're going to address those afterwards. First, we just want to make sure that our sparse grid, which is the grid that we're working on to start with here from the decimated one, is accurate topologically, like it follows the surface everywhere. That way we have reference points throughout the entire segmentation as to what the actual truth is. When we want to go and fix some of these more like ambiguous areas or add some density to our nodes where there's a lot more curvature, it's much harder to do or much easier to do if you have if you know all of the nodes that already exist are correct. Here's a spot where the prediction kind of cuts this off a little, so we can go off the prediction a bit. Let's go here. So it wants to attach in a weird spot. Let's start here. Let's add some. We know that that spot is correct there, so let's add just a little bit there. Now, yeah, now it'll let us do that. Let's add one node, two nodes, reparam. Maybe we'll get lucky. No, not yet. So see, the reason it's attaching here is because this is floating up so much. So when I drop this one down, if I move this over a little bit, if I hit reparam again, I might be able to just, no, still. Yeah, so we'll just shorten that just a touch. Just because it made such a strong bend, it doesn't really want to work with the meshing, which is fine. We don't need to be exact. We want to be good, but there's kind of obviously a limit on how good you can be, both just in limitations with the software and also the fact that, like, if you actually want to read something from the scroll, you've got to be able to finish a reasonably large segment in the amount of time that we're still doing the competition, right? So uh, there's kind of that balance that you're always fighting with there, where it's like you could make the surface better. I mean, every time you look at it, you could make it better, but eventually you'll have to just call it good enough. As long as you're reasonably close to the recto surface, ideally right on it, and you don't wander too much into the air or sheet switch. Sheet switching is really the most detrimental. As long as you stay relatively close to the recto surface and on the same sheet throughout, you'll be in pretty good shape. Segmentation quality can have a decent effect, especially in higher resolutions, but in lower resolutions, as long as you're reasonably accurate, you're usually fine. I keep moving along here. So I'm going to go back to just using the extrapolate method again. And we'll just kind of tighten this little fit here. Drop a few in here because we can see that it's wandering off the surface in these panes. Perfect. So where are we at now? First, let's save. Make sure you save often. Khartes is it's really, really amazing software. It works really well 99.9% of the time. But it does crash sometimes, and it really sucks when that happens. So it's a good idea to just save frequently. I'm not going to finish this entire thing right now for this video, but you can see I'm about, I don't know, halfway. When you do these, it doesn't really take that much more time. Like, if you can imagine, as I go along a row, if this row were twice as long, as you do the auto extrapolation, it doesn't really take that long to go just a little bit further. So in Khartes, one of the things with editing these existing ones, or even with creating new ones, is that the larger a segmentation is, the faster it is to add like raw area to it. So like if I wanted to expand this to the right by, say, one column, if I do one column over and then I just shoot all the way down, on a small segmentation, I'm only adding, a 1/10 of a centimeter. But if that segmentation was 50 centimeters in total, so let's just say 25 up, going down an entire row of 25 adds a significant amount of area versus going all the way down from one that's very small. And it doesn't really take that much time if you were on like a known source of truth. So like if you're following one sheet, as you're going, it's really easy to just follow this one for quite a ways. Where it becomes hard is when you have to when you're expanding out and down at the same time. So that's why it's really good to just kind of pick a pane. Like if I wanted to just take this straight down, it doesn't take very long, and it isn't very confusing. I can follow this sheet in this X pane pretty easy. I don't really have to think at all. I can just kind of plug along here. Then say I took this up one and I want to move over now Now I'm only following it in this pane again. Um, and it's pretty hard to get lost if you stay in one. Again, what I try to do is I just try to add in one. I try to follow in one and use this as my reference point. And then if I want to add in these other panes, I don't move in these ones. I just keep them around as additional references, but I don't move left or right so that I always know any point along this. If I put my cursor, if I hit RX and I center my cursor here, I know this point in this pane, in this pane, in this pane is correct, is on the right sheet. That's the easiest way to avoid getting lost in Khartes, is just, again, to know, I know that this node is correct. So I know if I look at it here, I know that it's on the right one, and I can place a few points here just to kind of like reinforce that that ground truth area. That's probably the most important part in Khartes. But if I find there's some areas where it's quite confusing, right? If I go here in this pane, I don't know where to go in X right now, or in the image of Z plane. I think I do. I think it's probably over here, but I'm not really 100% sure. So what I can do is, I know that later on this break isn't a break anymore, so I can just go above it or below it. Now, if I go in this pane, you don't see my red line here, but I know that this point's in the right spot because it is here. So I'll add a little bit, and now I'm going to move along in this pane, and I'll just add some points. We'll go this way for a little while. So now I've moved. You can see I've got more surface this way, so I can go this way a little bit. So now I'm further to the left than I was before. It's a little bit less ambiguous, but there's still this piece here. I'm almost certain that this is the back of a different one. I think that's actually the colesis, but I'm still really not sure. So I'm going to keep moving along here. Again, what I'm trying to do is, in areas where I have this kind of ambiguity, is utilize my other panes to just not deal with it at all. I could sit there and pan through the slices for 25 minutes and maybe figure it out, or I can just not do that at all. I can just totally avoid that area. So now I think this makes more sense. So I've got this here, which goes to here, this here, which goes to this one. So for now, I'm going to just make a quick path here. Never do this, by the way. I'm only showing this as a never do what I mean by never do this. I'm only showing this as a way to get around an area, but don't make weird shapes like this in Khartes. Try to keep this rectangular. You'll start to get weird things. What you would have wanted to do as you were going through here is adding a little bit of width. Like, see this here, you would have wanted at each of these points add just a touch of width to all of these, so you don't end up with this like eagle-shaped mesh. Because when you go to reparameterize, this one might work fine, but it has to try to retriangulate some of these missing areas, and you create really long triangles, which you can see the mesh does some very odd things when it has to do that. So avoid that by just what you should have done here instead, or what I should have done rather, is added a little bit of width in these dimensions as I went up. And again, I've got really long triangles here. You can put them in that pane as well, and then just drag them back. But you can see, you can see really sure why that keeps happening, but you can see how the mesh behaves very strangely if you do that. Now I've got, when I hit reparam, it does kind of weird things. It doesn't really know how to triangulate that, and you can end up with a pretty degenerate mesh where if you hit reparameterize, it might just triangulate to absolutely insane places and just kind of form a black hole. Um, so that's a reason not to do it. So I'm actually glad I did that in a stupid way, because now you can see. You can fix that in a few ways. Number one, you could just, if you find yourself having done that, honestly, a lot of times just delete the nodes and start over. Or if you've got a very degenerate like edge where you've got a long, real long skinny edge like this is a skinny triangle. This is exactly what I was talking about, where you see it's very long. The angle between the two is very low. This is a situation that Khartes does not handle well, and you want to fix these when you see them by just placing a point in the fragment view at the halfway point, recentering on it, moving it back where it should be. There's another one. And you want to try to keep those at a minimum. Those are the situations that cause your mesh to do really strange things when it tries to reparameterize. So if you can avoid them, as you're going, if you identify them as you're moving around, here's another one. You don't have to be like super, super, super careful with it, but it's just a situation that you should avoid if you can. But that's more or less it. You go through, after you do these rows, what you would do, so I've made each of these rows, so I've gone down, say 4 rows. What I like to do then is just take the midpoint, because I've got a very coarse mesh. I'll take the midpoint between 2 rows, because they're relatively spaced, so you can see I have these gaps. And you can hit your auto extrapolate tool here, just hit 3 to go to the left. Again, it's a little slow at first, but it'll go faster. And I can just hit 3 again, 3 again. So far I've been on the correct one, so I'm just going to keep hitting 3. Still looks good to me. I'll pull this one down a little bit. Sorry for the cough there. I'm just going to keep hitting 3 and moving along. Here I've made a mistake. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to get through this just manually right here. At areas where you have these merges, occasionally the auto extrapolate will pick the wrong one. So just delete it, start over. So I added that entire row between the two. I'll add one more just for demonstrations purposes. Again, in here, literally all I'm using is the auto extrapolate tool. I'm just hitting 3 and 4. So I'll hit 3, I'll hit 3, I'll hit 3. Move that one up just a touch. I'm going to pull these down a little because they've walked off the surface a little bit. Hit 3, move that one up a bit. And I can just keep plugging along here. Move these two down just a bit. And this one. I'm going to pull these down. So you're just kind of, as you go, pulling them down where needed and adding them where needed. So I've done a few. If you want to really look at it, you can make your volume data overlay high res again, or not high res, 1, so it has no opacity, and then you can hit V to lose the node overlays. But you can see where I've added them. In most areas, it's pretty accurate. I've got good agreement on my my horizontal fibers. I can follow one the whole way. I've got some holes though. So say I wanted to tighten up the holes here. I can just hit R on any node around it. Again, pick a node as a reference. Don't just like move your cursor. Don't just move into this spot and then try to place the node, because now you don't know what your reference is. You have no nodes around you. You don't know what correct is. I mean, you can interpolate based on the fact that like it's on here, whatever. Just pick a node that you know is correct. Now this node is below this, so I should go in my X plane or my Y plane, and I can see if I move my tracking cursor here, if I place a node here, it will go there. And there we go. So similar for this one. So I know that this is above this. So if I look in this pane here, and you can continue to do that for really anywhere you see that you've got holes. Now don't trust that the surface predictions, typically where the surface predictions, when you've got this like all blue, that means or whatever color you have for your overlay, that means you're probably pretty close to the surface, but that's not always true. If you look at this one, you can see I've got quite a bit of black here, and it's because the surface prediction is actually a little bit off the surface. So I can fix that by just dragging that down. And that happens sometimes. The surface predictions don't always, they're like on the right surface, but sometimes they're a little bit off of it. And so that's a really easy way to fix that. I mean, again, you can do kind of a coarse like general quality check, because you can see it is mostly true that where you're blue on the same surface, you're good. But in areas where the sheet wobbles quite a bit, it has like these high frequency wobbles like this one does. Sometimes you've got to go back and pull that a little bit tighter. Or here you can see that this one is a little bit off, and that's typically when the sheet moves like this a lot. The surface prediction will still be on the same sheet, but for a moment it kind of comes off it. So that's where you'll see those. For the most part, that's it though. Just make sure you save frequently, you reparameterize frequently. When you have good surface predictions, make sure to use them. You can see when I went across these, it's much, much, much faster to just hit 3 a bunch of times than it is, or 4 a bunch of times, depending on which direction you want to go, than it is to actually manually place nodes. Also, your carpal tunnel will thank you. If you place a lot of nodes in Khartes, you will find that you will you'll be clicking a lot. So use it when you can. And then you can also use it as a tool to just kind of like, say you want to place nodes. You can use it to kind of reason about the surface. So like if you go through an area that's a little bit more difficult, let's see if I can find one. I want to find a nice mushy area. There we go. So if I look at this area here like this, it's not particularly clear what surface is where. But if I drop my opacity of my volume data down, you can see that the predictions, although like not perfect and they make mistakes, you can reason about what's going on in here a little bit easier. So let's find a good example here. There's 3 here. The surface prediction has dropped it in this middle spot where it's a little bit ambiguous. And it's hard for a person to reason about what's going on there as well. But if you see 3 come in, and then you've only got 2 here, and then 3 come out. And so you can kind of use that information to say, okay, well, as I'm going through here, even though I don't have a surface prediction here, I know that there's 3 here, and I know that there's 3 here, so there is probably 3 in between. That's not always true, because sometimes if it's marked a colesis, and it shouldn't have, that can throw you off, but for the most part, that's true. So you can kind of reason about what is going on down there, even with not great predictions. For the most part, the predictions are pretty good. Here's another spot here. So here's one. It's got this one really well, but it drops this one. And we know that this is probably correct. Let's see if we follow it here. Yeah, because there's 2 that go through all the way. Sometimes you got to follow it for a little bit. So yeah, I mean, don't neglect using the surface predictions in areas even where they're not very good. Here's another good example. Okay, there's 2 here, there's 2 here, this one keeps going, this one keeps going. Sometimes you got to move a little bit to see if it's just a very short mistake. but that's probably the easiest way to use them. They don't do super hot on certain areas, but for the most part, they're pretty accurate. I mean, at least certainly easier than, I mean, if I were to try to segment this manually, it would take a very, 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 very long time without, if I were to try to segment this without any surface predictions at all, in a spot like this, you know, you could sit here and reason about what one is what and how many are in here, but it would take a long time. One of the segmentation team members, David, who's been segmenting for 2 years now, had I think it took him like 2 weeks, he said, or something, to segment like 20 centimeters in here. So, and that was with no surface predictions. So I would use them where you can. But yeah, I think that's it. I'll post this, and then if you guys have any questions about anything else with Khartes, feel free to hit me up. Have a good day.